Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 180 based on novel. So let's start. Since he couldn't find anyone, he figured he might as well go to the canteen, where he might run into someone, as well as grab a bite to eat. Hu Yuhao walked out from the Sea God's pavilion and rushed straight to the canteen in the inner courtyard. It was meal time. When he went into the canteen, he saw many familiar faces. Furthermore, the food in the inner courtyard had been prepared. Some people were queuing up, while some were already eating. Hey, isn't this Hu Yuhao? What a rare guest. How does he have time to come to the inner courtyard? Some unfriendly voices spoke up. When Hu Yuhao turned his head, he immediately saw a familiar face. It was Wu Feng, the person who had opposed him when he first came into the academy. It had been a long time since he had met her. Wu Feng appeared less sinister than she had in the past. Her body was much more slender, and she was also much more voluptuous. She looked a little bit like Ma Xiaodao back then. Ning Qian was seated beside Wu Feng. When he saw Hu Yuhao, his expression also turned slightly weird. They had gone through the love-querying test in the Yin-Yang love-querying valley. Finally, Ning Qian had managed to change her gender, from a she to a he. When she returned, Ning Qian spent a long time trying to adapt. It was only because of Wu Feng's help that she managed to gradually adapt to becoming a guy. At the same time, she fell in love with her male identity. After all, she could now openly be together with Wu Feng after she became a man. She could also become the true heir to the Seven Treasures glazed sect. After that, the two of them cultivated together in the inner courtyard. Due to their compatibility, they improved very quickly. They thought Hu Yuhao wouldn't be able to catch up to their cultivation speed, as he was too busy outside. Perhaps their gap had already been reduced significantly. Wu Feng, how are you? Hu Yuhao greeted Wu Feng. At the same time, he nodded at Ning Qian. Naturally, he wouldn't comment much on her gender change. It wasn't just Wu Feng and Ning Qian who were there. After hearing their conversation, a few familiar faces came over. Dai Huabin and Zhu Lu were among them, along with Xia Huanyue. They were once rising figures in the outer courtyard. Many years had passed since then. Right now, Wu Feng, Ning Qian, Xia Huanyue, Dai Huabin, and Zhu Lu had become the elite disciples of the inner courtyard. As they developed, the older generation of disciples, led by Zhong Leshuan, Hanru Oruo, and Wu Ming, had already graduated. They were now involved in some enterprises related to Shrek City. Although they hadn't left the academy, they were no longer part of the inner courtyard. Among the new generation of disciples, Dai Huabin was currently the strongest. He was now close to becoming a soul sage. Although some of the more experienced inner courtyard disciples were stronger than him, it didn't change the fact that he was one of the leading figures in the younger generation of disciples. When Dai Huabin saw Hu Yuhao, he was not as indifferent and hostile as he was before. However, he didn't appear overly friendly, either. He nodded back before pulling Zhu Lu away to get their food. Wu Feng snorted and replied, I was doing well, but I don't think you're that well. Why are you here? Are you still an inner courtyard disciple? I've never seen you cultivating in the inner courtyard. Hu Yuhao laughed bitterly. Of course I am. I've not officially graduated. I'm here today to take the graduation test. Wu Feng's eyes brightened. Graduation test? It seems like you're confident. Our graduation test is very difficult. Hu Yuhao said, let me try then. If I can't, I'll continue working hard. Take a seat, I'll go get something to eat. As he spoke, he turned around and went to get some food. He really was quite hungry by now. The food in the inner courtyard was as scrumptious as ever. Hu Yuhao got a big portion of emerald sea cucumber and another portion of stewed dragon meat, as well as some hibiscus crystal rice. He found a corner and started eating. The inner courtyard disciples in the canteen weren't just people that Hu Yuhao was familiar with. There were some who he didn't recognize. There were other guys and ladies who were curious when they saw Wu Feng talking to him. They were all inner courtyard disciples, but they had never seen Hu Yuhao before. Naturally, they were curious. Although Hu Yuhao wasn't particularly handsome, he had a very special aura. Even in a canteen full of elites, he became the focus of everyone's attention when he entered. Wu Feng twisted her lips and whispered to Ning Qian, "Brother Qian, what do you think Hu Yuhao's cultivation is at right now? Do you think he's a soul sage yet?" Ning Qian replied, "I guess so. He's been a member of the Sea God's Pavilion since some time ago. He enjoys much greater privileges compared to the rest of us. Although I don't know what he's been busy with all this while, it feels like he's much stronger than he was before." Wu Feng snorted and said, "So what if he's stronger? We've been working so hard recently. We'll be able to close the gap. He bloomed early. But if he doesn't work hard, he'll soon be overtaken. When we're titled Doluo, we don't know who will be stronger." Ning Qian shook his head as he chuckled. He didn't say anything. In fact, both he and Wu Feng knew that they couldn't compare to Hu Yuhao in terms of talent. Wu Feng wouldn't admit it only because of her own pride. They all knew that Hu Yuhao had long since transcended their level. They had always treated Hu Yuhao as their target. As for whether they could catch up to him, it was unknown. They weren't the only ones who treated Hu Yuhao as a target. Xie Huanyue and the rest whispered at this moment, "I think it's going to be difficult to catch up to him." He even established the spirit pagoda. "When all of you are at 7 rings, are you going to choose to fuse with spirits?" After hearing Xie Huanyue's words, Wu Feng and Ning Qian looked at one another and couldn't hide their desire. They had seen how effective spirits were. Right now, everyone knew that spirits greatly enhanced the abilities of soul masters. If a spirit was used well, it could be far more powerful than soul rings. To most soul masters, fusing with a strong spirit to be their origin spirit was the best. At least up until now, no one had fused with 2 spirits as Hu Yuhao had. Xie Huanyue lowered her voice, "If you want to fuse with a spirit, it's best not to offend him. He holds an important position in the spirit pagoda. Even the elders in the spirit pagoda respect his opinions. If he comes up with any tricks, we'll be unable to do anything." Wu Feng was petrified, and retracted some of her initial hostility. To genius soul masters like them, their future abilities and cultivation couldn't be taken lightly. Ning Qian laughed as he shook his head and said, "If Hu Yuhao was so petty, he wouldn't be so successful now. You don't have to worry about this. However, I don't think he's simply back for the graduation test." Wu Feng was stunned as she asked, "Don't tell me you're talking about the Sea God's fated blind date tonight." Ning Qian nodded and said, "He might participate. Otherwise, why did he come back within these 2 days to take the test? Wang Donga is missing, and he hasn't graduated. He's also single. According to the rules of the inner courtyard, he has to participate." Wu Feng's expression turned weird as she looked at Ning Qian. Ning Qian turned red and asked, "Why are you looking at me?" "It's all in the past." Wu Feng coughed and said, "Nothing, I'll keep a close watch on you. Let's go and watch tonight." Ning Qian nodded and said, "Let's go. We can watch from the boat." As they were discussing things, Hu Yuhao was having a good time with his meal. The food didn't disappoint him. As he ate, he felt a warm feeling in his belly, which slowly flowed out to his arms. He was feeling extremely relaxed. Even though he had the manifold mysterious ice essence in his body, and didn't need to eat since he could get his nutrients from the ice essence, it was much more satisfying to gain his strength through eating. Who would not want delicacies? Hu Yuhao was often starving when he was a child. He treasured and enjoyed food a lot. He gobbled up all his food and left nothing at all on his plate. Just as he was finished eating, someone knocked on his table. Hu Yuhao ate his last mouthful of rice, puzzled as he lifted his head. Being disturbed while eating wasn't very proper. Initially, he thought it was Wu Feng or Dai Huabin. However, he discovered it was a middle-aged man he didn't know when he lifted his head. This man looked as if he was 30-some years old. He appeared very solemn, and asked coldly, "Who asked you to eat in the inner courtyard canteen? Who are you? Tell me your name." "What?" Hu Yuhao was stunned. I'm a disciple of the inner courtyard. Why can't I eat in the inner courtyard? The middle-aged man snorted. Do we have such a disciple? Not even wearing your uniform. This, Hu Yuhao, was a little awkward. I'm sorry. You must be a teacher in the inner courtyard. I've not been in the inner courtyard for some time, and my uniform no longer fit me. That is why I'm dressed in something else. Look, this is my badge. As he spoke, Hu Yuhao quickly removed his badge from his chest and passed it over. The middle-aged man took his badge and immediately turned to leave. You're following me to the academic affairs office. He began to walk as he spoke. Hu Yuhao was momentarily stunned. This guy's a little insensitive. Does he think I'm just some loser trying to get free food? Please wait. I don't think I have the time. Hu Yuhao hurriedly stood up and followed him. Why don't you have time? The middle-aged man frowned, and his face was still as cold as ever. Hu Yuhao forced a laugh and said, I'm here to participate in the sea god's fated blind date. The middle-aged man's expression was full of disdain. You are to participate in the sea god's fated blind date? You're going to follow me to deal with this issue of freeloading. I don't care if you were once a student from the inner courtyard. At the very least, you aren't considered one now. I have never seen you before. And even if you were, coming back to the inner courtyard to get free food goes against the academy's rules. Follow me to be investigated, and if I find out that you're here often to freeload, even if you were once a student from the inner courtyard, I will cancel your status as a student and take away your graduation certificate. Ah? Hu Yuhao was astonished. He couldn't help but ask, is it this serious just for a meal? Furthermore, I'm still a student from the inner courtyard. The middle-aged man laughed coldly. The academy has been too lenient. That's the reason why villains like you have thrived and succeeded. Food in the inner courtyard is so precious, how can it be given to a person like you who rips people off just like that? Just look at how much you've eaten. Do you know how much this food is worth? This middle-aged man had stopped Hu Yuhao, and his voice wasn't soft at all. Wu Feng, Xie Huanyue, Ning Qian, Dai Huabin, and Shu Lu all heard him. Their expressions were all a little strange at this moment. However, even Wu Feng, who was never friendly towards Hu Yuhao, didn't have a sadistic look on her face. This teacher was going a little overboard. Even if a student who had graduated from the inner courtyard came back for a meal, how could that lead to his graduation certificate being stripped? Since when did Shrek Academy become so tyrannical? Hu Yuhao heaved a sigh. He would probably have reacted angrily if he hadn't been in Shrek Academy. However, he had always treated Shrek Academy as his home. He respected every single one of Shrek Academy's teachers, and so he forced down the fury in his heart as he lowered his voice and said, why don't we do this? I'll pay for the food that I've just eaten. I really can't afford this delay. He had already promised his eldest senior sister, and would probably run into big trouble if he didn't hurry over in time. What if his eldest senior sister didn't let him graduate? Pay? You're thinking of paying now? The middle-aged man instantly felt like he had grabbed onto Hu Yuhao's tail. Where were you earlier? Furthermore, how do I know if this is the first time that you've been freeloading from the academy? Follow me back to be investigated. We'll revisit this once the investigation is complete. He turned to walk out as he spoke. Please wait, teacher. Ning Qian strode over and blocked this middle-aged teacher's path. Why haven't I seen you before, teacher? I can vouch that he's part of the inner courtyard. The middle-aged man was momentarily stunned. I'm a new teacher who handles discipline. You don't know me, but I know you. Your name is Ning Qian, you come from the Seven Treasures Glazed sect. You can vouch for him? Are you sure? If you're covering for him, then you will also be punished. Ning Qian frowned and said, Teacher, he's often not around because he's usually outside carrying out missions. That's the reason why you've never seen him. Even though you're responsible for enforcing discipline, you can't be so unreasonable. You haven't even asked his name, so how do you know he's not part of the inner courtyard? If there's someone who is most worthy of eating in this canteen right now, it's not me, and it's not anybody else here. It's not even you. It's him. The middle-aged man was already convinced when Ning Qian stood forward to vouch for Hu Yuhao, but he erupted furiously when he heard her words. Does that mean a student has a higher status than me as a teacher? Do you know I can punish you for humiliating a teacher for what you've said, according to the academy's disciplinary rules? Bullshit. Hu Yuhao and Ning Qian were both holding back because they were concerned about the academy, but there was someone here who didn't have a good temper. Wu Feng wouldn't have said anything if this middle-aged man was targeting Hu Yuhao, but she wouldn't have it if he was targeting Ning Qian. Her fiery temper immediately exploded as she arrived beside Ning Qian in a flash. You suspect our identity as students in the inner courtyard, but we're starting to suspect your identity as a teacher. We've never seen you before, so what do you have to prove that you're a disciplinary teacher? Since when has Shrek Academy said that former students can't eat in the academy? When have we had this rule? You're embarrassing yourself. Detain all of us if you can. The man was infuriated when Wu Feng talked back to him. All right, then I'll take every single one of you away. I want to see what else you all have to say in front of the academy's rules. Teacher, we have to be reasonable, and that's required even for a teacher. I think you were probably hired from outside, and you must have had a hard time passing the academy's test. Don't ruin yourself. Xie Huanyue said grimly as he stood up as well. He wasn't the only one. Dai Huabin and Zhu Lu walked over slowly, and they circled around this middle-aged man from the other side. The other students from the inner courtyard all stood up and surrounded him. Everyone had a black look on their faces. Of course, students weren't allowed to offend teachers. However, this was Shrek Academy's inner courtyard, and the students from the inner courtyard had a different status compared to students from the outer courtyard. In Shrek Academy, even students from the inner courtyard could become teachers if they were willing to go to the outer courtyard. The middle-aged man's words had already incurred public anger. Even though most of these students didn't know who Hu Yuhao was, they all had sentiments attached to their academy's canteen. If everyone who wanted to come back for a free meal like Hu Yuhao did would be punished by the academy, and might even have their graduation certificates confiscated, that made everyone conflicted. Even though they didn't say anything, they still surrounded this teacher from the inner courtyard. Stop this, everyone. This is just a misunderstanding, Hu Yuhao hurriedly interjected. He glanced at Ning Qian, and a grateful look appeared in his eyes. Ning Qian had been the first to step forward. Ning Qian smiled faintly and said, "We have never thought about offending and talking back to our teachers, but shouldn't teachers respect us students, as well? Yuhao, you should take your leave because you're busy. We'll deal with this. Wu Feng, can you please look for Dean Cai? I've just seen her, she should still be in the inner courtyard. Please ask her to come and deal with this. If we are really wrong, then we will admit our mistakes and let the academy punish us however they like. Otherwise, we must ask the academy for an explanation." Hu Yuhao nodded in Ning Qian's direction and said, "All right, sorry for the trouble." That was the most appropriate way to deal with this matter. He didn't dare to stay any longer and hurriedly walked out. "You may not leave." The middle-aged man suddenly reached out and grabbed at Hu Yuhao's arm. The aura on his body flared up at the same time, and soul rings swiftly rose from beneath his feet. They suddenly emanated soul power and immediately pushed everyone around him a few steps backward. Eh? Hu Yuhao didn't expect this teacher to be so dissatisfied with the result that he would actually decide to make a move against him. The teacher's palm contained a formidable soul skill, and 8 soul rings had risen from beneath his feet. Being able to become a teacher in Shrek Academy's inner courtyard meant that he was quite strong. However, his 8 soul rings weren't in the optimal combination. He had 2 yellow, 3 purple, and 3 black soul rings. Even though it was considered good, it wasn't considered much within Shrek's inner courtyard. A cold light flickered in Hu Yuhao's eyes. He had been holding back again and again, but this man just didn't know when to stop. Even the nicest people had a threshold, not to mention Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao raised his left hand, and his palm immediately became jade green in color. He didn't release his martial soul, but he pressed his hand toward the middle-aged man's palm just like that. The middle-aged man grabbed Hu Yuhao's palm. He had thought this through, and displayed his cultivation rank as a soldier to intimidate these students from the inner courtyard. Just as Xie Huanyue had guessed, he was an external staff member who had just arrived recently. One often felt good about becoming a teacher at Shrek Academy, and that was the reason why he naturally felt a little arrogant. Today, he had witnessed Hu Yuhao eating in the academy's canteen without his uniform, while he was also in charge of discipline. He immediately wanted to stamp his presence among the inner courtyard students, but who knew that doing so would incur resentment from so many students? He had thought this through. He would detain the first perpetrator before he would intimidate the other students. Then, he would leave to prove whether this student in white clothes was guilty or innocent. When that happened, he would have a chance to push forward or to retreat. As he grabbed Hu Yuhao's hand, it gave him a very warm and damp feeling upon contact, but just as he wanted to gather his strength to channel his soul power into Hu Yuhao, he realized to his fear and surprise that Yuhao's hand had become as tough as steel. He couldn't move Hu Yuhao no matter how much strength he used. Teachers cannot attack students in the academy. Shrek is an academy, not a prison, Hu Yuhao stated in a low voice. The middle-aged man felt a wave of intense chill come from Hu Yuhao's palm, and his entire body shivered from the cold. In the next moment, he could see that Hu Yuhao's eyes had become extremely deep and profound, and he felt like his entire soul was being sucked into them. Hu Yuhao shook his wrist lightly and flung the teacher's hand away. However, he still didn't attack. Instead, he took a step forward and planted his feet in front of the man as the formidable aura of a savage beast erupted from his body. Hu Yuhao controlled this aura, and only the students in a small radius around him could feel it. That included Wu Feng, Dai Huabin, and the others, who swiftly stumbled backwards with frightened looks on their faces. The middle-aged man stumbled backwards as this aura intimidated him. He lost his balance, and fell down on the ground just like that. His face had turned ghastly pale. He had never expected this youth who looked about 20 to exude such a frightening aura. It was like something that came from a savage beast in human form. Hu Yuhao turned around at Ning Qian, who also had a frightened look on his face. He nodded in his direction and said, "Just go according to what you said, and invite Dean Cai to deal with this. Thank you for today, everyone, I'll take my leave now." Hu Yuhao left the canteen with a single step, and disappeared from everyone's sight. Ning Qian and Wu Feng exchanged a glance. Ning Qian's eyes were full of fear, while Wu Feng's eyes were full of exasperation. The corner of Wu Feng's mouth twitched as she laughed bitterly and shook her head. She was just talking about surpassing Hu Yuhao, and he immediately gave her a show of strength. Even if this teacher wasn't considered a powerful soul master, he was a soul Delur. Otherwise, how could he become an external staff member working for Shrek Academy? But even a teacher like this couldn't seem to resist Hu Yuhao at all. Even though it had to do with his carelessness, the pressure that came from Hu Yuhao was even more frightening than a titled Delur. Furthermore, Hu Yuhao shook off the teacher's grasp so easily. Did that mean his cultivation was? They weren't the only ones reacting this way. Those who were familiar with him, including Xie Huanyue, Dai Huabin, and Xu Lu, were all speechless. Xie Huanyue forced a laugh and said, "We'll always be dejected if we keep comparing ourselves to him. Looks like we won't ever catch up to him in this life." Wu Feng turned and left. "I'm going to look for Dean Cai." The other students from the inner courtyard were coming to from their astonishment. Someone muttered under his breath, "I think that senior said he's going to attend the sea god's fated blind date. I have to hurry, too, it's about time." The other students who were single, especially the girls, thronged out and vanished in the blink of an eye. Those who already had partners stayed behind and surrounded the wretched, formerly arrogant teacher. Hu Yuhao was also stumped once he left the canteen, because he had forgotten where he was supposed to assemble for the sea god's fated blind date. "Forget it, I'll just head to the lakeside. The event is held at the lake anyway, so that can't be wrong." He could still remember where he had started the other time. Hu Yuhao immediately accelerated after he thought that, and ran towards the place where he had last participated in the event, where he had stepped onto the lake water. Hu Yuhao quickly knew that his guess was right because he could see students from the inner courtyard, dressed in red uniforms, walking towards the lake in pairs and trios. They were walking in the same direction, and it was clear that these people were going to attend the sea god's fated blind date. He couldn't be wrong as long as he followed them. Hu Yuhao was a little dejected. If he had known better, he would have found a red uniform to wear. My white clothes might be a little too glaring when I go on to Sea God's Lake later. But he couldn't care about that much anymore. He would risk being late if he went to change, and that would spell big trouble. "Eh, aren't you Yuhao? Eldest senior sister was just worrying about looking for you, afraid that you won't show up. It's fine as long as you're here." Two silhouettes quickly hurried to his side, and Hu Yuhao immediately felt relieved when he saw them. They were old acquaintances. Teacher Wang, senior sister Han, greetings. Wang Yang was the teacher who had led Hu Yuhao's team in the first season of the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament, and he was with his girlfriend, a former student from the inner courtyard who was second only to their eldest senior sister, Zhong Lishuan. She was Han Ruoruo, who had already become a teacher. Han Ruoruo's set of soul skills back then still left a deep impression on Hu Yuhao, and he still had some lingering fears now that he thought about them. Wang Yang seemed a lot more cheerful compared to all those years ago. He smiled and said, "You're finally back, Yuhao." Lishuan was worried out of her mind before this, and she even sent someone to look for you at the Tang sect. "It's fine as long as you're here. Let's go, quickly. We can't be late." Han Ruoruo smiled and said, "That's right, we won't forgive you if you dare to be late. Eldest senior sister and I will be the hosts." Hu Yuhao replied, "Eldest senior sister has ordered me, so how could I dare to be late? I went to grab something to eat in the canteen, and when I finished my food, I realized that I'd forgotten where we were supposed to assemble. It was great to run into you guys. But it doesn't really matter whether or not I'm there. If not for the Academy's rules, I wouldn't be here to share in the fun. I'm just here to go through the motions, anyway." Han Ruoruo's beautiful eyes rippled a little as she laughed and said, "You still have to be there, even if you're only there to go through the motions. Let's go." They walked towards the lake together. The sky hadn't turned completely dark, and he was actually earlier than he was back when he had first participated in the sea god's fated blind date. The male students from the inner courtyard hadn't completely assembled yet, while the female students were specifically guided somewhere else. Hu Yuhao had gone through the sea god's fated blind date once before. He stared at the lake's surface that shone in the light of dusk, and fell into a bit of a daze. He could clearly remember how Donga had appeared in front of him that time with her true appearance, how she had called him idiot, and how she seemed like she was being sassy and blaming him while carrying a tinge of embarrassment and happiness. Hu Yuhao would never forget it. How great would it be if I could return to that moment? Hu Yuhao clenched his fists subconsciously, and his feelings and yearning for Donga were suddenly raised to their highest possible level in that moment. "Are you all right, Yuhao?" Han Ruoruo asked in surprise. Hu Yuhao's spiritual power was much stronger compared to back then, and it naturally flowed out as his emotions surged up. The formidable spiritual aura even caused someone as powerful as Han Ruoruo to react in shock. Hu Yuhao was awakened from his memories, and hurriedly calmed down as he forced a smile and said, "I'm all right, senior sister." Han Ruoruo smiled back. "As long as you're all right. I'm the host, so I'm going to go ahead and get busy. You two can wait here. Someone will come when it's time to begin." She waved to Wang Yang and Hu Yuhao and drifted away. Hu Yuhao watched Wang Yang's eyes as they followed Han Ruoruo, which only withdrew when she could no longer be seen. Hu Yuhao giggled and said, "Teacher Wang, you're deep in the river of love." Wang Yang blushed. "Nonsense. Let me warn you, Yuhao, I'm one of the assessors for your graduation test tomorrow." "Oh? You're an assessor? Then you have to be a little more lenient when the time comes," Hu Yuhao said with a faint smile on his face. Wang Yang snickered and said, "Yuhao, let me remind you, don't think tomorrow's test is easy. Many people are waiting to take care of you. Ah? Hu Yuhao was momentarily stunned. "Take care of me? Why?" Wang Yang patted Hu Yuhao on the shoulder and said sincerely, "Seems like you don't quite understand the assessment criteria for our inner courtyard students to graduate. Let me brief you." Hu Yuhao hurriedly humbled himself and said, "Thank you, Teacher Wang." "What exactly will happen?" Wang Yang chortled and said, "Every one of the inner courtyard students can be said to be prodigies chosen by heaven. Every one of them has outstanding talent, and they all have varying strengths. You guys are both outstanding and hardworking at the same time, which is the reason why you can stand a class above the rest and become part of the inner courtyard. If you wish to graduate from the inner courtyard, then you have to meet the academy's standards in your strongest suit. Therefore, the inner courtyard's graduation assessment is different for every student, and everyone has different tasks." For some reason, Hu Yuhao had an ominous feeling about this test, even though his cultivation was already at 8 rings. He could tell from Wang Yang's words that they didn't plan to be nice to him. His graduation assessment was supposed to just be going through the motions, but it didn't seem that easy after all. "Teacher Wang, then how is this graduation assessment going to be carried out?" Hu Yuhao whispered. Wang Yang continued, "I don't quite know how the assessment is going to be executed, but it's definitely not going to be easy. I've heard that Elder Xian has personally designed your graduation assessment. You're the youngest, unprecedentedly so, member of the Sea Gods Pavilion. You have contributed much to the academy, and the academy has to nurture you well because of that. Therefore, your assessment has to be especially strict. The Sea Gods Pavilion will convene to discuss your examination tasks, but I'm not too sure about the details. I suspect the test won't be too easy, so good luck. I'm only one of the main assessors for you tomorrow. There are 7 in total. I know that Dean Yang, Dean Cai, Dean Xian, and Zhong Leshuan are a few of the remaining 6, but I'm not sure who the other 2 are." Hu Yuhao's jaw slowly dropped as he listened to Wang Yang. His graduation assessment had brought the Sea Gods Pavilion together for a conference, and he had 7 judges? What was happening? Tomorrow's test. Teacher Xian is watching me closely, and the academy doesn't look like they're going to give me a good time. Life is too hard to live. Wang Yang laughed in amusement as he watched Hu Yuhao's depressed look. "All right, that's enough. That's the academy's care and concern for you. If you can't pass the assessment, you can just continue studying and cultivating in the academy, at worst. Look at your eldest senior sister, she's become a teacher in the academy. You're part of the Sea Gods Pavilion, so you can do the same." Hu Yuhao had a bitter taste in his mouth. He didn't think much about it before, but right now, Teacher Xian was forcing him to learn about forging soul tools properly, and Hu Yuhao had to attend him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to forge a proper pill furnace, and he couldn't raise the Tang sect's overall strength. Therefore, he had to pass the graduation assessment tomorrow, no matter what. This video will end here.